Many years ago, at one place I worked, we had this spectacular Southeast Asian wedding. It was a buyout, so they bought out the building, and it was marvelous. It was no expense spared. They had performers flown in from overseas. There were people from all over the globe coming in. It was wonderful. No expense spared. No expense spared. And it had taken some time. We had done a lot of work. I had personally taken that project on. It was given to me. Lots of things to execute. It was great. It was great. And that night I was working and, replenishing food, doing all the thing. We were taking care of all the food, obviously. And near the end, I was like working 12, 14 hours. I was starting to get a bit tired. And for some reason, I was there till the end. I don't know. Normally, I don't like staying to the end. I like kind of being in the middle. I like being that mid shift. Things when I come in, things have started, and then I get to a point I'm like, okay, and I leave it to the juniors to kind of close up. But for some reason, I was there. I don't know. And at one point, as we were starting to shut down, one of the organizers said, "Hey." They said, "Hey." And I said, "Yeah," because I know what that hey is. And they said, "Do you mind cutting the cake?" And now listen, I have cut wedding cakes before. I don't enjoy cutting wedding because I always afraid that I'm going to mess it up. I'm not a pastry chef. But, all the cooks are looking at me like, you're doing it right. Because the thing is, this wedding cake was $6,000. And it was tall. It was taller than me, or about as tall as me. It was delicate. You had to I don't know. I was very, very nervous. I did not want to do it. But I had no choice. So I somehow, and you got to go out there. It's dark. They're playing dance music. There's people all over the place. I've got to somehow get this cake into the kitchen, and somehow I have to divvy it up. So I get out there. I don't know how I brought it in. I must have grabbed one of the apprentices or whatever. And this was a very tall cake and so many tiers. And so I just tackled it. Again, I've never really done that before, but I just jumped in. What else can you do? You just jump in. And so I started cutting it up. Now, I want to say, because I snuck a piece. It's my right. I cut it. I get a piece. It was terrible. It was a terrible cake. It wasn't very, it was for show. You want a nice cake, you go to Costco or Loblaws. You know those grocery slab cakes? Love them. It's very rare to find a fancy, very decorative cake that tastes good. It's either one or the other. Once in a while, I have had a cake that looked phenomenal and actually tasted good. It was moist and all that. Anyway, well, we're cutting it. We're putting out all the plates. We realize most of the people aren't eating it. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The point is this, and this is what I'm going to talk about here on this episode of Seared Stories from the Stove podcast. My name is not Hey, it is Paul Silva. Welcome. Glad you're here. What I want to talk about is doing things scared. And in my career, I've had to do a lot of things scared. Like one hotel I worked at, massive displays, absolute big displays in these ballrooms and all that. I had never really done it. I had been shown a few things, and then they said, okay, go to it. And then you go to the props room. Now, here's the thing. I was scared witless doing it the first one or two times. But you know what? I really loved it. At the end, wherever I went, whatever big venues, and I worked in large venues, many of them, if there was a function, all that, I was like, I'd be jumping up, raising my hand. I'll decorate. I loved it. Loved it. But the first time I did, I was scared. The first time I had to plan a function, scared. There were so many things I had to do. First time I had to carve a hip of beef in front of people at a buffet, hundreds and hundreds, and scared. So many things that I have done both as an apprentice cook and, as a junior sous chef or whatever, I did scared. And, recruiting people, first time I did, I was scared. And, I was thinking about this today, and it's like, I noticed that I had a really hard time applying that to my personal life. Why couldn't I apply? I think why I could do this at work, but why can't I do things scared in my personal, my private life? And of course, the logical answer is that, well, there's structure around work. Like, you know what you're doing. There's a certain, like, you're in your bandwidth kind of as a chef. And also there's deadlines, there's pressure. The boss is like, you are doing it. I don't care. You're doing it. I'm like, okay. So that helps to do that. But I also think there's something about fear, right? Like, fear can truly drive us. And there's something about just getting pushed into action. And that's why work was easier, because I had some sort of pressure or deadline to get me to do something, where in my own life, there, in some ways, in many ways, there wasn't the pressure. Sure, there might have been things I had to do, especially if there's things with my kids and I've got to take whatever. Like, I didn't leave, there was no structure around it. So I just left it open to, it would just be open. Like, I don't have to do it. So, and I would sit back into my comfort zone. And, my habits wouldn't change. And on the last episode, I talked about habits and changing the recipe, I called, right? New year, new recipe. And so while I was changing things at work and really growing and making big strides at home or just in my own personal life, I was stuck a lot because I didn't have that. And there is something, we all have things that we want to do, but we're scared. I'm in the midst of that. I'm in the midst of doing many things now that I'm kind of scared. And I think it was the last episode, I talked about one of my biggest fears is the fear of looking foolish. That's one of my biggest fears. Huge. I never thought it was that big, but it is. It's a juggernaut. And so that holds me back. That has held me back. And this year, definitely, I'm like, okay, enough of that. Like, because if you're not going to put yourself out there, you're just not going to grow. And one of the biggest things that happens when you do something scared is you get confidence. There's many. I'm going to talk about the benefits of doing things scared. But, Aristotle said that an individual develops courage by doing courageous acts. And so at some point you can philosophize and theorize and analyze and do all that kind of stuff. But at some point you got to jump on the bike and start pedaling. That's what you got to do. You're going to fall. Most of us fall when we go on a bike for the first time. Do we look foolish? We think we do. Other people are like, oh, she or he or they're learning to ride a bike. How cute. Oh, no, they fell. They scraped their knee. Ouch. No one's thinking, ha ha. No one's doing the Nelson, Simpsons. Ha ha. No one's doing that. Maybe some other kids. But they're goofs. But kids are goofs. But doing the courageous thing, because it does take courage to step through and do the things that scare you, right? And when you do that, things change. We all have things that we're scared to do. We all do. And it's important to you can acknowledge it. Yes, acknowledge it. But also understand that the only thing that's going to change in that situation is you and how you perceive it. And so if you constantly look at it like it's scary, and it's this mountain that you can never, ever overcome, it's going to be harder. But when you see it as just a step in the right direction in terms of growth, when you minimize just how big it may be, it's easier to take a bite out of it. How many times have you done something you were scared of, and when you did, you're like, oh, that wasn't really that bad? Countless times. We make it bigger than it is. And that's fear being in control, right? Fear is running the show. And here's the thing about fear. There's nothing wrong with a healthy dose of fear with certain things, right? We have fears for a reason. We don't want to get too close off the edge of a cliff because there's a fear we might fall, right? All sorts of fears like that. There's certain things. We just got to be careful. I don't want to put my hand, I don't want to walk into that building that's on fire because I might get burned. Like, there's certain fears that we have that are there for a reason to keep us, self-preservation. But the fears that we normally are talking about are the ones that are attached to a negative emotion, right? There's like an insidiousness about fear that hides between the invisible line between what's healthy and what isn't. Marcel France said, the secret of life is this: when you hear the sounds of the cannon, walk towards them. And that is just really saying about don't give so much power to fear, right? And the more you face fear, the more control you have. And the more we understand that, we can then start to really expose ourselves to the things that scare us. And then that is going to propel us further. And there's just so many beautiful things that happen when you start stepping through fear. And courage is not like being like, I'm going to do this, nothing scares me. No, courage is doing something in spite of it scaring the bejesus out of you. And how powerful is that? How great is that? When you start doing the courageous acts, as Aristotle said, you start to build that muscle. You start to realize that you're not this cowering little kitten. You know, you're this brave, intrepid person in charge of their own life. And the more I learn, I'm 54, I'm still learning this lesson. There's still things that frighten us. And it's not the big bear outside. It's not this, some monster. It's going up and talking to a stranger. It's, sending a text to someone. It could be joining a club. It could be starting a hobby or an activity that you think is not for you. There's just so many things. But when you do them, I know you've done this, gentle listener. You have done things that scared you. And you're alive right now. You're listening to this. You're alive. You made it. You did it. And even at the end of the day, if it wasn't meant for you or whatever it is, you still did it. You still did it. So I want to share with you just a few things that do happen. So hold tight, and I want to share a few things, and then we'll see what happens. Now, before I get into some of this, I just want to share quickly that readings are still available, doing tarot, oracle, found objects, all that kind of stuff, helping you, if you're stuck in something and you want some additional information from your guides or spirit, I help do that. Also, my coaching is still available. I do one-on-one coaching, and this is to help you in your creativity, help you in your creative life, helping you to approach things differently, new perspective. All the things that I talk about here in this podcast, these are things that I have helped people in so many ways in our one-on-one coaching. So if you want to check that all out, links are in the description. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok. And that's pretty much it. I'm limiting my space, and I've got more things coming up. It's going to be pretty fun. Anyway, let's talk about the fear. The fear. When we push through fear, there's a few things that happens, mind, body, spirit. It's so cool. First and foremost, in your mind, first you're overcoming limiting beliefs, right? Like we hear those voices, you can't do that. That's not for you. Those people are special. Bullshit, right? When you step and take action, you overcome a lot of those beliefs. You expand your sense of what is possible. I mean, how cool is that? The other thing that happens is you get this, like you build resilience. Right? Every time you overcome a fear, you have this mental resilience. You learn to manage your anxiety. You learn to manage the stress from all this. You bounce back from these setbacks, and that can help you adapt in other areas of your life, right? I didn't realize that till later because I was like, I can do this at work. Why can't I do this at home? In my head, I kept them separate. That was my issue. And when I realized that, the challenges that I overcame, I didn't change. I wasn't different. Like nothing about me was different when I was at home. Like I just allowed my limiting beliefs to overcome that. And the other thing that also happens with your mind is your growth mindset grows, of course, right? Because instead of looking at these things like, oh my God, these monsters, you're just like, okay, this is cool. It's a challenge. I'm a little scared. But this is going to be for my growth. This is going to be for my learning. And so you see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. And so this perspective, like it just kind of fuels like this desire for continuous improvement and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone. I'm as guilty as anyone in wanting to stay in my comfort zones, but I know how painful it is too. And sometimes when we say we're stuck, we're really wanting to get out of our comfort zone, but we're too comfortable. And we have our limiting beliefs around that. So we stay stuck because we're being pulled in two different directions. And that pull is like, it's hurting us. And that's where we get stress and feeling down and all that kind of stuff. Now in your body, right? When, the stress, we have that fight, flight, fawn, freeze. And what was the other one? There's a fifth one. I always forget it. That response, right? And that releases cortisol. And of course, and adrenaline and all that kind of stuff, right? Heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension, you start sweating, all that. So when we step into fear, we might feel that. But as we start to practice more and more, that is going to shorten, because you're like, I've been here, I know this. And my body is responding at a very cellular, very lizard brain level. But when we start to shift things and start to see things as opportunities and gifts rather than threats, we reduce that. We reduce the cortisol. We reduce that stress response. And also on the other side of that, you get like this endorphin kick, right? It's like this natural mood booster that gives you that sense of well-being. And that can create it's like almost like a reward. It can create like a feedback loop. Now, I'm not suggesting you do all this to get like some sort of high or buzz, but there is a natural reward for stepping into and facing fears. And it's your body responds as well. And in terms of like your emotional self, or if maybe go as far as spiritual, but more your emotional health, you have that confidence that we talked about earlier, right? You get a sense of accomplishment. And you realize that you're stronger than you think, right? By taking the action, you train yourself, you train your soul, your spirit, that you are meant for this. You are capable of this. And throughout all of this sort of thinking and reflection, your self-awareness grows. And you start to see, in some ways, when you step through certain fears, like you see what really matters to you. What are your values? It can help like shed a light on like your strengths, your weaknesses, and allowing you to grow and develop. And it doesn't mean you have to master everything. We all have naturally strong and weaker areas of our life. Absolutely. And there's sometimes I'll test myself and it's like, okay, here, like turn your weakness into a strength. I don't believe you have to do that for everything. Maybe you may want to test yourself. Certain things, maybe you want to push yourself if you feel like you want to do it. There's some things I'm just not good at, and I'm not going to turn it into a strength. I don't want to. I have other strengths I want to lean on more. I'm not necessarily a handy person. I don't now want to become, learn how to build a house or to build cabinets. I don't care. I don't care to. It doesn't bother me. I'll pay someone to do that stuff. I don't care enough. It's not a value of mine to be handy, right? Now, there's certain things that you may want in your life that you want to, I really do want to learn that. Cool, then do that. But don't feel like you have to. And the other thing, too, is when you start stepping into these things, and this is the big lesson I am learning right now, is when you step and try new things, it helps to give you a greater sense of purpose, right? Because when just think of all the areas in your life that you're holding back because of fear. Maybe fear of looking stupid, fear of what others are going to say, fear of failure, fear of success, fear, like there's countless fears that we have. Imagine if you were to eradicate most of those fears and you actually did the things that you really wanted to do. What would your quality of life be? It'd be phenomenal. Right? You'd have more purpose in your life. People are always talking about, what's my purpose? Well, I do that too. I struggle with, what's my life about? But it's also because I'm not doing the things that I really want to do because I'm afraid to do them. Ding, 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 light bulb. So you have that as well. And then overall, like your self-image, right? You feel better about yourself. You have stronger relationships with others because you're more confident, you're more self-assured. Of course, you're going to have stronger relationships with people. You're going to build stronger connections, especially if you're going out there into the world and meeting people. And you're going to attract more of the good stuff into your life, right? And then all of this is just like this feedback loop, this cycle, because then as you do that, you're more open to trying new things, to pushing through fear. And it becomes more of and that's my goal too. I'd love to get into a place where I'm like, I don't really know. I'm going to try it. I'm not there yet. I'm totally not there yet. But as I'm starting to step into certain things myself, I'm starting to feel more empowered. I'm starting to feel more confident. I'm starting to feel more rest assured. And that's all the inside work. That's an inside job. And avoidance is a very natural response to fear, but it's not the one that works, right? Because we're so much about avoiding pain. And sometimes we do things when it's desperate, when you have no choice. And that can be useful, yes. Like I'm thinking about, some people with addiction. Like for me, you hit your bottom and then you're like, okay, I feel I have, we call it but the gift of desperation. But I don't want to have to get to a point where I'm so desperate. Like you don't want to get to the point where the elevator, it crashes into the basement because you didn't feel like you wanted to get off at some point along the journey. And it's up to you, right? It's about how much does fear have a stranglehold on you. And when you start to realize that you are actually the one in control, the juggernaut, the big boogeyman underneath under the bed, it shrinks, and you grow, and it's a beautiful thing. So, it's when you look back on your life, you don't want to look back in regret, like I could have done this, I should have done this, etc. Do it because you want to do it, and lay fear down, put it to the side, and just step into the thing that you really want to do, because it's magical and it's just going to change your life. I know it's already starting to change things for me, and there's so much more for me to go. And I lament all the years that I allowed fear to rule. I don't beat myself up over it. This is the growth, the path that I've had to go. And I just share that because you don't have to spend a long time, lamenting what could have been when you can make the change now. The best time to make the change is now. So I invite you to do that. All right. With this top tier content, top tier cake, which was drier than a monk's sandal. I'm telling you, it was not great. Anyway, with that, kitchen's closed. Now scram.